Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all and peace out to the rest of you. Y'all already know who it is. The blackest heart, the blackest mind, the blackest man on social media, sign of black and shining again, asking you to hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Please tell me how clear I sound to you. It looks like it's only two of you right now, but if my sound is clear, go ahead and put in a 1. If I sound bad or you can't, well, if you can't hear me, you won't hear this, but if I sound bad, please type in a 0. Let me know how I sound to you, gentlemen. Okay, all right. So I sound clear to both of you. Excellent. All right. Well, for the two of you that are up this early in the morning, I appreciate that. If I had started doing this about 6 hours ago, a lot of people would have still been up and I would have made them miss their sleep. But okay, 4 of you now. But when I give people time to sleep and then I start here about 6 Central Time for you all, 7 Eastern Time, a lot of people, they still miss it. But as you all hit the share button and other people wake up slowly, I imagine that people will tune in. This one ain't gonna be very long anyway, at least not the reviews. I was shocked to see these. I actually watched both movies in the same day. And I was surprised to see that these movies were made and that they had the actors in them that they had. And to be honest with you, gentlemen, I started thinking about it and I figured, well, maybe these movies never made it to the theaters. Maybe they went straight to streaming, straight to either Netflix or Amazon. Maybe that's what happened. So I thought about it and realized that must have been what it is. So I asked some friends of mine and they told me that both of them went straight to stream, that neither of them was in movie theaters. That made sense because in all honesty, we already know that if you make a movie like this and it goes into the theaters, you make movies like these that go to the theaters, somebody's gonna try to take you out. And when Black Panther was made or when Black Panther was released, a lot of us were happy, we were excited. But by the same token, we also knew that if Killmonger had been depicted as actually being heroic with a stance like this, the director of the movie would have been taken out. And even when Chadwick Boseman passed away from cancer, a lot of us thought, okay, this can't possibly be an accident. It can't possibly be a coincidence. This is definitely something that somebody engineered, definitely an assassination. We went into conspiracy mode. And I'm not really blaming us for that. I mean, after all, he did depict a Black man in charge, not necessarily as stoic as his father, but he did depict a Black man in charge of a Black nation with advanced technology and military that survived by keeping a secret of its prosperity from the outside world. and not letting in refugees either. That was the gist of it. And so you naturally would have thought, okay, yeah, they definitely took him out. They injected him with something. Same thing happened though with Bob Marley. In all honesty, when Bob Marley passed away, some people said that he actually did not get a toe injury treated. Walaikum salam said to him. And then from there on, he got sicker, and that was how I guess the cancer got discovered. And a lot of times, these outside injuries become the means by which a latent cancer gets discovered. This has happened even to regular people that I've known. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start the review, and I appreciate y'all being patient with me. So first thing, Without Remorse is actually a Tom Clancy book or a Tom Clancy novel. And he always writes these action novels, if you will, about government agents. So this one we consider this to be one of our movies, but it's actually a remake of Tom Clancy one. If I'm not mistaken, Tom Clancy's had others that were turned into books as well. I just don't remember which ones they were. I mean, they were turned into movies as well. I think the Jack Ryan series, the movies that star Harrison Ford, I think they were written by Tom Clancy, but look, I got a bad memory. What I don't write down first time I hear it, if I don't hear it again and again, I will forget. But in this one, of course, the thing that was good about Without Remorse was that the heroes were us and the villains were them. And even the honest European Americans were jerks. You might remember the character Richard. That's the one that was suspected of being corrupt by the main character, John. But it turned out, to be honest, he was just a jerk. So there was not really much of a positive depiction of any of the European Americans in this movie. Even the honest one could not have a personality that would convey loyalty and warmth and loyalty mostly to the people on his own team. The main character, John, that's the one played by Michael B. Jordan, in that movie said he fought for America when America was right, or when he thought America was right. And now that he can see that they're wrong, he's going to play by his own rules and he's going to fight for himself. Now, this is the actor's second time playing a trained government operative for the United States that got too black and too militant and got too conscious for them. This is his second time playing it. So in a nutshell, this is almost like Killmonger at the root, but put into a different context. That's in a nutshell what this was like. For me, it was like watching the story of how he gets turned into Killmonger, because it's the same actor. So it was easy to make that correlation for me. Of course, I'm probably reading too much into what the directors and the movie makers and screenplay writers actually intended. But that's what jumped out at me, because last time I sat and watched him act for that long was in the Black Panther. So the movie, all in all, I'm not going to go through the whole plot. Y'all, some of you watched it, some of you didn't. But what I'm going to say about the movie is that this movie was strange because it was positive propaganda for us, for Black Americans, and it was negative propaganda for European Americans. Now, there has been, this has existed. Positive propaganda for us and negative propaganda for massa has existed in real life before, but it has not been actually made into a full-length action movie like this in the United States. The Iran hostage crisis was real life. And see, that's why Jesse Jackson was a negotiator during the real life Iran hostage crisis. They didn't want to listen to massa anymore. And some of this they had actually gotten from the Vietnam War. Because see, during the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong knew that people were drafted. And they knew that we were being drafted in larger numbers. Now, I honestly don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. I don't know if Muhammad Ali's refusal to go fight was the egg or if that was the chicken. I'm not really sure. But as the war went on, of course, the chicken and the egg began to come from each other and the cycle developed. He was certainly known about for refusing to go and fight over there, refusing to accept the draft and to go shoot at the Viet Cong. He was certainly known for that even over there. So African American soldiers in the army that were there in Nam came back and they reported hearing things broadcasted like "Soul Brother, not your war," and reported incidences in which they were spared by Viet Cong. As long as they didn't shoot at the Viet Cong, they wouldn't be shot at. And if you notice that a lot of Vietnam veterans that are us seem to be ultra disturbed, that's one of the reasons why. Mr. K, yeah, he's cool with me. I haven't spoken with him in a long time, but that's not his fault or mine. It's just been scheduling, I think. But yeah, he's still cool with me. I don't know of any reason otherwise. All right, so when it came down to the Vietnam War, that was when a lot of them got awakened because, see, remember that back during the day, back during the time of Malcolm and later Muhammad Ali, a lot of what they were saying was not as accepted as we think it was by our population, by our numbers. Remember, Malcolm was known, he was more infamous in his life than he was famous. Remember that. Ossie Davis had to remind people that he had never been involved in an incident of violence because nobody had come to him and been violent until the day that he got shot. In his eulogy, Ossie Davis had to point that out. But when he was alive, when he was around, he was more infamous. And it was a big strain on Malcolm because on one hand, you had MLK, and MLK's acceptance rose because of Malcolm. MLK was not popular when he began. And then along came Malcolm, and people said, we might want to listen to MLK. I'm talking mainstream America and us. And then when Muhammad Ali came out, remember that there was intense pressure on other African Americans to renounce his militancy. And there was even I think Joe Louis renounced it, if I'm not mistaken. So there was that kind of pressure there. And I'm saying that to say that it wasn't as easy back then to be these guys as it would be for me today to have the same platform. So a lot of the soldiers that were regular run-of-the-mill rank and file, going to church on Sunday. I mean, this is before the electric slide, but they were just regular rank and file brothers. They weren't especially conscious. But they must have heard this stuff. And then they go over there and they find out that, you know what, I'm actually over here fighting for massa, but I'm drafted. It's like finding out that your religion was a lie in a nutshell. And so that's why when you see a lot of our Vietnam vets, they can be especially disturbed because they had to go through it at times. But then there were also those of them that saw when they were spared. And so it woke a lot of them up, but it was a rude awakening. So the positive propaganda has existed before, but the funny thing is that that now you have this in a movie, and I'm sure that the reason this was allowed and that the director is not taken out is largely because this one did not go to the theaters; it went straight to streaming. And so, since people are not meeting each other face to face as often with COVID, there's less of a chance of people spreading these ideas personally. I'm here to make sure that this idea of mine, that this view of mine spreads electronically. You don't have to agree, but I'm just here to make sure that somebody hears it. What I'm gonna say is this, the last thing about that movie, Without Remorse. Last two things, I'm sorry. They put a sister with a natural in there and she's the commanding officer of the blood. By the same token, when it really comes down to the functionality, then she's more of a support for him. She doesn't command him heavy-handedly or command him in ways that would ruin him. She doesn't necessarily stop him from doing manly things. She doesn't advise him to break the law, but she doesn't stop him from doing manly things. And even when he takes matters into his own hands, she may be a good strategist and tactician. But even as his commanding officer, she didn't hold him back. However, they had to inject that in there. And the thing is, as you know, you normally in the military, you're going to not largely get rank based on experience. And this goes to show that in many cases, in the framework of America, it is largely going to be the men that are under us. We're going to be under the direction of the sisters because they were let in first. Be it government or corporate, they were allowed in first. They get the experience, they get the rank, and that was done by design. But you also see how smart she has to be, because if she's going to support the bruh, then she has to be extra sharp, extra smart, extra slick. And that is true. When sisters want to have your back and be in your corner, they got to be extra smart, extra sharp, and extra slick. Because they're not just going to catch it from massa. It's also going to be from their own sisters. Could be the one that does her hair every 2 weeks. She's caught being too supportive of us and too fair to us, and it's over. And that's the second to last thing. Last thing I'm going to say about this is that non-Americans that are neither us nor YT would see this as an insight into America. And they would see this and think that we are the heroes, the pillars of honesty against Dwight Mann's corruption, and even bad manners when they aren't corrupt. That's what others would see. So if you are from a relatively neutral or independently thinking nation and you see this, you might get the impression that we're the ones that are the good manners and we're the pillars of justice and certainly honesty. We have been the moral conscience. I didn't say conscious, but conscience with an N in there. We've been the moral conscience of America for a long time. That is very true. That's the last thing I'm gonna say about that movie. It's true, El Dorado. They would have, if you had a rash of and a wave of many of our men refusing the draft, they would have started killing them. They would have actually done so. And because pretty much what they were saying is, you're going to catch a bullet one way or another. You're going to take an injury over there, or we'll just execute you here. Red Seth Lord, you're right. That movie, The Spook Who Sat by the Door, is now that one. I heard talk of a remake or a reboot, and I don't know if it's true, but I've heard talk of it. But that one, of course, that needs no review from me. That one was a classic. I saw it as a kid, and now mind you, I would say I saw it in my early teens. I saw it about 1989, I think, is when I saw it, the end of 1989. I couldn't believe they made a movie like this, a full-length movie like this, back in the 1970s. And I wanted to know what happened to the director and the writer. I was wondering, I wondered if he was still alive or not. At the time that I saw, 1989, I don't know when he passed away, but I really couldn't believe it. I thought, okay, I mean, they killed Malcolm for saying even less than this. They certainly are going to kill this director. Not that I wanted them to, or that they must have already done so. But at that time, you had no internet, at least not in widespread civilian use. I didn't even hear the term internet, so I didn't know I could just look up a biography from somewhere. But that movie was something else. And I think that my parents might still even have the VHS. No VCR anymore, but I bet my parents still have the VHS. All right, so the next one I'm going to review is going to be Black Box. Now, this one's deep. This is a rabbit hole right here, gentlemen. And I don't know if a lot of y'all saw it, but Black Box is a movie about a widower, a man, a husband and father that got into a car wreck, woke up out of a coma from the wreck with amnesia, no memories. His wife's dead. He's now the only caretaker for his daughter, and his daughter's holding it down. He's trying to get his old skills back too, but along with his memories, his skills left him. And he still has his college buddy that's willing to help out, check up on him, and all that good stuff. And he undertakes an experimental procedure to try to regain his memory back, and it makes him question who he is. Now that's the synopsis of it. That's the nutshell. In this one, I'm going to have to go in deep, and I'm going to have to go into the plot to do it justice. Because this one is deep. So I'm going to put a spoiler alert in here right now. Main character's name is Nolan Wright. There's a reason for that. The actor that played him is named Mamadou Ahlier, I think. I might be mispronouncing his last name. So it doesn't sound like he's Ados. It actually sounds like he's West African, probably Senegalese or Gambian. The actor, I mean, but the character's name is Nolan Wright. For all intents and purposes, he's Ados. His daughter's name is Ava. So he's the car accident victim. He's the one that wakes up a widower with no memory and a daughter. His close friend from college is Dr. Gary Yeboah. Now, Gary Yeboah, maybe it's pronounced Yeboah or Yeboah, I forgot which one, but Dr. Yeboah is played by another non-Ados actor. And I think that I've seen him before, but I can't remember where I saw him. I remember that I saw him in 2017 or 2018, but I just can't remember what it was I saw him acting in. There's a Dr. Lillian Brooks, and she's played by Felicia Rashad. So Claire Huxtable was playing Dr. Lillian Brooks, who's this expert in memory and head trauma and such. And so she had an experimental procedure to help amnesiacs. And so she invited Nolan to try it out in the movie. Bianon K has said he's noticed a trend in Amazon with these storylines. And so Bianon, I'd love to know some of the other movies that follow this trend. And my review is probably going to bore the hell out of you because I don't think I'm telling you something you don't know. I doubt that I am. If you've seen a trend, then you may be bored by my review, and I apologize in advance for it. But yeah, it seems like now that everything's being released straight to streaming since theaters aren't full, this is what we're looking at. And I was looking forward to maybe going to a movie theater when I got back to the States, because they're expensive over here. Tickets here are more costly than they are stateside any time of day. Like stateside, you got matinee, and I mean, hell, if you're on vacation, you can go any time of any weekday and save money and watch what you want. And if you're an early sleeper like I am, you can be in bed shortly after sunset instead of waiting at these long lines and paying extra to get into a crowded movie theater on a summer night. And y'all know I'm from that Gulf Coast, so it is humid and muggy this time of year there. So instead of me waiting outside in that kind of that Mama Africa heat, and even at night, having the mosquitoes tear your butt up while you try to get tickets, it's nothing for me to just on vacation, just get up, go around the corner from my parents' house on a Tuesday, 11 a.m., go get a ticket. And now that you can't do that anymore, and you got to sit at home a lot, or find other means of entertainment where you're just not around as many other people, this is coming out. It's like directors can go ahead and make these movies because it doesn't have to go filter through whoever governs the box offices. Doesn't have to go through that because, see, this tells you that when you're at home and you're watching this for entertainment, it's good, but it also tells you that it's less powerful than if you're in a box office theater. a movie theater watching this. And here's the reason. When you're at home and you're watching it, the only one you know that's seeing that is you and whoever's sitting next to you on that couch. When you're in the theater, you know that everybody else in there, even if you don't know the people, you know that everyone else in there saw the same cuss word thing you just looked at. And in all honesty, I think that after Black Panther, somebody probably decided even that was too much. Even though there were limits on that, even though Killmonger was not lionized the way that that type of character needs to be and must be, absolutely must be. Even without that, even with that in place, in all honesty, we all look and we said there's no reason that we can't have something like that if we have the technological know-how and we have the same resources. So that means that one of the things that movie did drive home, I'm talking about Black Panther, is that our underdevelopment always has to have an outside force and an outside hand in it. Some of us only talk about the interference from others. Others of us only talk about how we hold ourselves back. Very few of us will talk about the combination between them. But publicly speaking, we know that the last thing you want to say is that there are outside forces influencing this. And that's what that movie drove home. So getting back to the black box. In the plot, Nolan Wright was getting offers from Dr. Brooks to participate in this experimental procedure to help him out. He decided to go ahead and participate in it after talking with his friend, Dr. Gary Yeboah. Ava was holding a lot of things down, helping him to remember stuff. And then and he was already having some nightmares and things even before he went to Dr. Lillian Brooks. Confusing nightmares. When he went to Dr. Brooks and he started those sessions, it wound up making his nightmares worse. And in his memories, he couldn't see faces. Now, the movie fragments became violent. The memory fragments became violent because it was playing like a movie in his head when he was in these sessions. He would undergo hypnosis. The memory fragments were violent, and he couldn't understand why, because he didn't have his full memory intact. So I want y'all to understand, if you saw this movie, remember, he had to go to Gary Yeboah, and he had to ask Dr. Gary Yeboah, was I ever violent with my wife? Dr. Yeboah said to him, if anything, you were too nice. You've been a very nice, loving, doting father and husband. She would have told me if you had been violent. And you see how your daughter Ava looks at you. She's not looking at you like that because of the teachers, because of me or anyone else. That's you. That's you she's looking at like that with loving eyes. That's you. So you see, in this movie, the Ados brother did not know who he was because of a trauma. It affected his head, killed his wife. So in actuality, he becomes the involved father, the involved single dad, because he's no longer with the wife. Of course, in the movie, she's dead. But in real life, it could be anything. But he is the involved father. However, it is easy for someone or nothing at all to convince him that, or make him doubt at least, that there was something wrong with him. And then maybe he even caused his own demise, the death of his memory, the accident. It was Dr. Yeboah, the non-Ados. Actually, he's not even just non-Ados. He is specifically from the continent. You can tell by the last name. Because see, the actor did not play an Ados character. The one that played Nolan Wright, the actor Mamadou Ahlié, played an Ados character. But the one that tells him those memories are not yours, that's not you. I know who you were, even if you've forgotten. That actor, also non-Ados, is playing a non-Ados character. And he's saying, and he's a true friend. He's rejoicing anytime that Nolan gets any of his memory back. Oh yeah, I'm going to preach today, y'all. If you know anybody that wants to hear a sermon, go ahead and hit that share button. Because even though it's a Tuesday morning, you're going to get your Sunday or your Friday sermon now. And if you're Hebrew Israelite, you can consider this your Saturday sermon. Because none of this is accidental. In the movie, it comes out that the reason why he's having these fragments and the reason why he can't see faces in his memories and the reason for the violence is because the doctor herself, Dr. Lillian Brooks, though she came up with this experimental procedure before she lost her son, she still lost her son, and she downloaded his consciousness and was trying to upload it into Nolan's brain, thereby taking over Nolan's body with her son, Tom, that had died 2 years before. And this is the reason she's trying to resurrect her son who's gone. And this is the reason why Nolan Wright is up here with somebody else's memories in his head, making him doubt who the F he is. While he's under hypnosis, trying to regain who he is from an outside trauma that made him lose that, the one that's supposed to be helping him, the Ado sister, is actually trying to supplant him with not only her deceased son, but a no good idness at that. Because it turns out that her deceased son, when he finally has enough of his consciousness uploaded into Nolan Wright's brain and body, he comes out and he says, yo, mom, how long I've been gone? 2 years. I died. What am I doing back here? It worked. I found a way to do it. I can do it. And who's this guy? And he looks in the mirror talking about whose faces he's seeing. And all of a sudden, she tells her son that the accident victim in whose body he is now residing is he's just the perfect patient, the perfect pawn on which to run her experimental procedures. She wanted Tom back. She wanted Tom Brooks back. And she said, I want you to go back, get your family, and be the man I know you can be. And it turns out that he's been abusive to his wife and daughter the whole cuss word time. What do you get from this? What I'm saying to you, gentlemen, is that to use the term ADOS as a description is one thing, because it is a distinct culture within the race, and that's fine. The race has always been culturally and linguistically diverse. We always have been. We've even been phenotypically diverse. There's some parts of, not even Saharan, but there's some parts of Africa, not in the Sahara, in which I'm not that strange looking. We've been very diverse. That's fine. And the other thing about the homeland, the home continent, is that despite the diversity, we have not usually been hostile towards each other. The intertribal warfare that we're taught was so common in the motherland, and it was the reason that we were ever kidnapped and enslaved in the first place, is not as common as what we would think. That's not the normal state of affairs. It never was. Even the means by which our ancestors got snatched up by others that looked like them, even if they spoke differently, even that was based on hostilities that were stoked by that outside influence that I'm not allowed to name here, or else this would be demonetized. Now, I know that from history. Alcohol was actually commonly used to induce this. Rum was mass produced in factories in Europe when palm wine took time to make on the West Coast. And I say West Coast, I don't mean California and Oregon. And so alcohol was one of the major things. Alcohol is a drug, especially in large quantities. Frequently, it's a drug. We've seen what winos are like. We've seen a similarity between the wino and the crackhead. And one of the things we understand is that most of them will give up anything to get that next hit or drink. It's a drug. Chemical warfare at its finest. And that's how they were able to get what they were able to get from the continent and get one to turn on the other. Also weapons. But in the movie, what you see is that you have the Eidos with a fragmented memory, but who's not a bad person, being demonized not only to other people, but even to himself by the sister that's supposed to be helping him out. But notice something else too. The innocent sister, his wife, she's dead. She's not guilty of anything, but she's dead. She's not active. She's a non-factor. She's not able or she's not willing to oppose the ones that are guilty. Then you got the sister in the form of Tom's former wife, Tom's widow. You got the sister that was abused and she's traumatized. She probably ain't gonna be much good for nobody else after that. But she could easily become a Dr. Brooks if she goes down the wrong path. If that's how she's going to deal with her trauma. And then you got Dr. Brooks, who it turns out has been very harsh and very domineering and very negative with her son. Always that tough love. Oh, I love you. I'll even bring you back from the dead. But no matter how much I do and sacrifice for you, you're never good enough. And here's the other thing. In the end, and this is a spoiler alert. In the end, when the consciousnesses of Tom Brooks and Nolan Wright are fighting inside of Nolan Wright's brain during that last hypnosis session, Dr. Yeboah and Ava bust in and say, Dad and Nolan, and they're calling him while he's in a fight with Tom Brooks to fully control that body and that brain. Of course, Tom eventually says, even Tom, the former abuser, he realizes that the reason he died was because he was abusive and his wife kicked him down the stairs in self-defense. So he caused it. He realizes it's his fault and he stops fighting. Nolan is the one that gets up out of that session and walks off with his friend, Dr. Yeboah and Ava. But it was the voice of innocent Ava and also the voice and the admonition of Dr. Yeboah that breaks Tom's spell, who's only there because he's been resurrected by Dr. Brooks, his mother. And what I'm getting at is that the movie is telling you, on one hand, yes, Red Sith Lord, it's a depiction. I don't think the movie makers were trying to say that the pick-me is going to die, deserves to die, but the movie is, the one that made it is actually saying that that the pick-me winds up dead. Or she must be absent, she must hide, if she exists, she must hide and still remain invisible. Because if not, they'll kill her anyway. Now, we already know, if you're going to take someone that's an ally to you, what it doesn't mean you no harm, and somebody else is willing to harm that person for being not only good to you, but being fair to you and not being hostile enough to you, the one that's going to go after them is your enemy. They just want to knock this person out the way. I mean, understand, even if relationships are transactional, if someone goes to my business partner and is coming down hard on my business partner for not screwing me over, or coming down on my customers for paying me fair price for what they buy from me, that means that they are really an enemy to me. If they're going to harm my customer or my business partner for being fair to me, not overpaying, not giving me all the advantages, but if they're going to harm them for being fair to me, that means that I am the true target. That's what that would mean. And that's what's going on here. Dr. Brooks was the enemy to the black man. She's highly accomplished. She is intelligent. She's very competent. And I'm sure she actually was able to help people regain memory. But she represented the non-white man enemy to the black man. Now, of course, there is that outside enemy, but she represented the internal enemy. Yeboah, Dr. Yeboah, represented exactly who it is that we're pushing away right now. As ADOS, listening to people like Yvette Carnell, who either coined the term or got it from someone else. By the way, Yvette Carnell was put on by Boyce Watkins, Dr. Boyce Watkins, y'all. So too was Cynthia G. Don't forget that. Dr. Boyce Watkins doing the work of Dr. Lillian Brooks. Dr. Yeboah represents exactly who it is that we're now pushing away. He represents, to a certain extent, he represents the non-ADOS. But more importantly, he represents the non-ADOS from back home. That's who also he represents. Not just the non-ADOS from the islands. He represents more specifically the non-ADOS from the continent, who himself has undergone colonization. Maybe not enslavement as well as colonization, but he has undergone colonization. He's in the United States because of what the same outside enemy did to his country, from which his ancestors were not taken, but in which his ancestors still had to suffer the effects of colonization, though they were not kidnapped. Whether his ancestors were doing the kidnapping or whether they were hiding out during that time of the great atrocity back home, whatever his ancestors were doing, he represents the word from the continent that he doesn't hate us. He's not the enemy. He wants to see us do well, but he wants us to know who it is that we are. He wants us to not let someone else tell us who it is that we are. Because when you think about it, in all honesty, we know the propaganda, the negative propaganda, right? The usual propaganda that we got in the movies. Yeah, I'm preaching today. I'm a descendant of preachers. The usual propaganda we got in the movies that we're used to is where we are badly depicted, and you know who Master's very well depicted. And to a lesser extent, Boom Shika Bon Quisha and Sapphire, to a lesser extent, are badly depicted, but they're still badly depicted. But what happens is this: in order for, we men view ourselves, we black men have been trained in the United States and even in the Caribbean, to view each other through the eyes of Boom Shika, through the eyes of Dr. Brooks. And this is not a knock against Felicia Rashad at all. I'm talking about the character, not the actress. We've been trained to view each other through the eyes of Dr. Brooks, but Dr. Brooks views us through the eyes of Massa and his stereotypes. And so what I'm saying is that we don't view each other like Jungle Bunnies in the Tarzan movie, savages, because we watched the TV and that's it and we believed it. Because see, we know that's TV. We judge each other based on this and view ourselves through that lens because it was reinforced by Dr. Brooks in our lives. For some of you, Dr. Brooks was your mom. For others of you, it wasn't. For some of you, it was your aunt. For some, it was your grandmother. For some, it was an older sister, an older cousin, a teacher. But for many of you, it was multiples of these, some combination thereof. I was fortunate. I didn't get that from either of my grandmothers. I didn't get that from my mother. But I still saw that for many of the sisters, especially when they're hybristophiliac, they see the TV. And that's how they view us. And they also look at the soap operas, their stories. And that's what they aspire to live like. That's what they want. That's what they're looking for in their lives. And then they see us on TV and they believe the depictions, and then they see us in real life and they raise or they tell us that if you're going to be a real man, that's how you're going to act. And then they turn around and the Tom Brooks, which are the ones who believe this stuff, they get released out. They're the minority. They're not fully alive, really. I mean, like just like in the movie, they can pass away and they can come back. They're not really the main character, but they are released out onto the rest of us. But who made them? The same ones that complain about them. And the same ones that are blaming Nolan, Dr. Gary, the same ones that are blaming the rest of us are the ones that make them and then release them out onto the rest of us. And that's what I've been trying to get at here. Dr. Gary Yevua, he represented exactly who it is we need to be. That old-fashioned, from the continent, patriarchal, not cruel, not mean, not disloyal, not double-crossing, not Tom Brooks. He's the option. He is the one that is patriarchal, but he is the real man who has his identity intact. And Nolan is the real man, but his identity is not intact. And he's going to go back to it once it's intact. And who is it that helps him? It's the innocent Ava, the one that actually is not yet corrupted. She ain't become Dr. Brooks yet. She still loves Dad. And Dr. Yevua. You see, when in that movie, if you saw it, understand this, when you see Nolan come out of that last session, waking up from the hypnosis, and Tom is not in control anymore, don't think that that's the end of what's going on inside of the head. No. What happens after the movie, the sequel, after the movie ends, there is the sequel in real life, and that is still going on in the head. You see, Dr. Yevua is also a part of, just like Tom Brooks was alive in Nolan's brain, Yevua is also alive in your brain. Who we used to be. Not mean, not cruel, not abusive, none of that, but certainly in charge, patriarchal, and succeeding. Definitely manly. Dr. Yevua was the manly man who still had compassion. He was not the stereotype of the brute that the feminists say that men are. He was a man without being a brute, but he was very much so a man, and you weren't going to tell him what to do. He had to tell Noel, if anything, you were real soft. You were a pushover. You didn't even like to watch boxing. So you definitely could not have been violent and abusive. You would have been the extreme opposite before you would have been violent and abusive. And that might actually be the reason. Might actually been the reason that Tom was willing to go back and try to get his ex-wife once he was in control of Noel's body. He couldn't come back. Tom could not win his family back because even that traumatized sister was awake enough to say, I'm not going back to this BS. Didn't I have to kick you down the stairs the first time? What you doing back here? Fit the guck out my house. This was deep, man. And if you guys don't, last thing I'm going to say before I cut out, and thank you all for listening. Last thing I'm going to say before I cut out is oftentimes we don't necessarily look at who it is that made it, who directed it. But we have to look at that. Just like Ryan Coogler, who was the one that made Black Panther, and now we know about it. Take a look at this one. You see, it was directed by Emmanuel Osei-Kuffour Jr. and written by Emmanuel Osei-Kuffour Jr. Yeah. Now, some people are going to credit the directorship to Monique Gardenberg. She's one, but it was directed and written by Emmanuel Osei Jr. Now, I can't remember why Sr. was famous, but Emmanuel Osei Jr. is the son of Emmanuel Osei Sr. His family is from Ghana, and he was raised in Houston. And so he decided back in 2007 to go down this path, to become a director. That's where his journey to become a director began. So this is someone who is both African and American that wrote and directed this movie, and this is his hidden message to us. He made a movie, and I think it was smart for him to make it during this time, because he, as a director, he probably knew that this is the time you can put a type of message like this into this kind of movie, and it goes straight to streaming because it's not yet being filtered through the box office controllers for the theaters. So he gets, I think he understood. I think he knew what he was doing. I don't think this was a coincidence. Why, when everyone's stuck at home, does this movie come out at the end of 2020? What's the reason for that? It might cost less to make some of these movies now if you're not going to put them in theaters. Maybe it costs less, and it could have been cost effective. So I'm not knocking that possibility. But what I'm also getting at is that now, at this point, at this time, when people aren't going to the theaters, and you can put this sort of thing, as Bianon Cave said in the comments, he knows the trend that now Amazon's putting out these storylines. I don't see it as much with Netflix. But when things are being released straight to streaming, he puts this out. Bruh, the director's trying to tell you and me something. This is not a message. Even if you don't understand the message, you can tell that the movie is made by someone that does not hate ADOS. He's not the enemy. You got a Ghanaian American director and writer. He wrote the story, mind you. So understand, whoever you credit for directing the movie, apparently it was directed by two, but whoever you credit for directing the movie, this is his story. He wrote it, then directed it. And I'm sure he did a lot of the casting too. So you got these, you actually have Dr. Yebawa played by a Nigerian American actor. So what he's pretty much saying is, we're not the enemy, man. But you got to find out who you are and stop letting people tell you who you are, even if it's going to be your wife, your mom, your sister. You can't let Dr. Brooks keep telling you who you are just because she's a doctor, because she has her own plans. She's not stupid. She's not incompetent, but she's not trustworthy. And at the end, towards the end, when they finally wake up, know from that chair, it's Yebawa that holds Dr. Brooks's hand from operating the machinery anymore. And he says to her, you swore an oath. He has to remind her. It's him that has to remind her, no, you breaking your promise. You out of line. You're not helping him. And she winds up losing her gig, winds up losing it. But then there's more. In the end, she's sitting at home with a box and she uploads the EEG, meaning the brainwave scan, into this box. And it's her son, Thomas Brooks' brainwave scan. So in a nutshell, she's managed to download his consciousness, which is what she was experimenting on even before he passed away. That tells you that even though she started off professional, competent, just learning or trying to make a breakthrough in medical science that would help people out, help people remain who they are, even though she was doing that in the beginning, when she faced her own tragedy, she didn't handle it well. And now she was going to try to, at the expense of somebody else, bring back her son, which is completely selfish. It's not wrong to want that. It's not the grief that's the problem. It's how she handled the grief, even at the expense of someone else. She was willing to kill anyone she could get away with killing. to bring her son back. But she didn't start off as evil. All of this is in there. It's just a movie, right? No, man. It's just a movie until you start thinking. So I want to say this. This is not just a movie review for me. Before I go, I'm going to tell y'all, this is, not only is it not just a movie review for me, but this is actually, to me, this is a symbolic, very underhanded, subconscious way for this man, without addressing the debate in front of the people with whom he must work to make the movie and who are not interested in our affairs. This is a way that he's extending the olive branch. This is somebody from back home sticking his hand out to shake our hand and say, peace. I'm not the enemy. I'm not the problem. It does not suit me to see you suffer, to see something bad happen to you, to see you continue going through this amnesia. But somebody that you love and trust is telling you lies about who you are in the first place. And I know because I knew you before they started lying to you. I knew you before the trauma that even caused you to lose your own memory. And the one that's causing you, the one that's now telling you you're someone else, isn't even the one that caused the accident or the trauma. She's not the one that made you lose your identity in terms of who you are. Wasn't her that made you lose it. But when she sees an opportunity, she's going to try to resurrect the itness. She's trying to bring to life somebody's stereotype, the enemy's stereotype of you. She's your biggest concern and threat right now. The actual enemy that you and she both share, they've taken their eyes off of you for now. They're not the immediate threat right now. They're there, but they're not the immediate threat. But she is the immediate threat because she's acting on that enemy's behalf, even if she doesn't think she is. And if you tell her, she doesn't care. And it's because even though you're this good dad, husband, good man in general, even though you're that, she's in love with the idness. And if she finds a blank copy, if she finds a copy of you, the hardware, but no software, she'll put his software in you, in that copy. She's not only in love with the idness. She's not just the one that married him and found out he's idness, he's abusive, he's all of these negative stereotypes. No, she's the factory for him. She raised him and turned him loose. One of the reasons I know is that my cousin is the victim. The widow of Tom that actually killed Tom Brooks in self-defense, that's my cousin in real life. Traumatized. And now she's becoming a Dr. Brooks. Slowly, but she's becoming a Dr. Brooks. She was Muslim, but because the ex-husband was Muslim, she lost her religion because he was abusive. He was the idness. He was Tom Brooks. I didn't know that. I found out in 2018 when she decided to get a divorce. She said this to me. And she showed me the screenshot. She showed me the receipts, the text messages from him where he apologized for choking her unconscious. So she didn't make that up. He was a Tom Brooks. But now what is she? Now at this point, she is an overweight baby mama, hardcore feminist, darn near misandrist, with a very nice guy but simp boyfriend playing stepdad to her sons. Genetically, I have no problem because he's looking out for my younger cousins and they're still very young boys. So it's not even against my DNA, but I feel bad for him. However, I can't reach him. I can see what's going on, but I have no way to reach him in contact. And I feel bad for him. I truly do. So anyway, that's the movie review because it's not just a movie review. And watching this, I reassert what I said before to those of you that are coming from the continent, from the islands as well. I reassert this. When I say that I am ADOS, I'm merely using a description so that I don't lie and say that I have the exact same culture that you do. When I identify myself as ADOS, I'm actually doing it more so out of respect for what makes you distinct from even other people from the continent, let alone from me coming from North America by force and coming from the continent genetically. When I say that, I mean it as a descriptive term, the same way that you would say that you are Hausa, that you are Fufulde or Fula or Fulani, the same way you would say that you are Mandingo, or sometimes you pronounce it Malinke, Soninke, or Serahuli, Vai, Gola, Gad, Ewe, Kru, Basa, Loma, Timbi, Kissy. Same way that you would identify yourself as these things, even though you have a nationality that you share with even other tribes. When I say ADOS, I just mean that we are a forcibly created tribe, but that's the culture in which I grew up. I do not ever say that I'm ADOS as a way to say you stay over there. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm different from you. I am not going to be one of those. God willing, I'll never lose my mind and become one of those that says I'm ADOS, as if to say you stay over there because you're from outside of the US, and matter of fact, you're further away from me than Master's grandkid is over here. I'm not doing that. And I'm not promoting that. And just like I tell men, especially men that women to walk away from, attractive women to walk away from, to not become stepdads before they are natural fathers. Same way I say to do that. I tell men to, not only do I refuse to do it, I tell other men, don't do that. Do not do that. Don't accept those terms. I'm also saying to other men, do not use ADOS as a division beyond the description. You can use it as a description, but do not use ADOS or FBA to be divisive, to push away other Black folks. You can even say, stop coming over here, and then using the category African American to get things that were meant to help us repair from what they did to us. You can even say that for the sake of fairness. But this is not about sitting up here and saying we are a completely different people just because we want to be. And by the way, let me go over here and kiss up to the one that divided us in the first place. When I say to you that I am ADOS, I'm not saying to you that I am not you at all. I'm saying to you that I am related to you, and that not only am I related to you, without being identical to you, I am still related to you, but I'm also related to other groups that I'm also from them. I am a combination of you and the other groups that you could not claim if you claimed the group you claim. In other words, when I say I am ADOS, the same way you're saying, Walaikum Salam, Dwight Hayes. Walaikum Salam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. When I say that I am ADOS, I'm saying it even though I say it the same way you might say that you are Mandinka or Ga or Ewe, Kru, Pele, Basa, Mana, Gio. I am saying it the same way you say these things, but I'm also saying that I am a combination of you and these other groups by force. I'm saying I'm you and him. I'm saying that even though the Yoruba and Igbo don't like each other that much, I am Yoruba and Igbo combined. Even though the Fulani and the Igbo can't stand each other. Genetically speaking, I am Fulani and Igbo combined. I'm saying to you that though I have been forced to be distinct from you culturally, and you're used to that and we're used to that because we're already culturally diverse, I'm also saying to you that yes, I am related to you. And I'm also related to someone else you might hate back home. But I am not your enemy. I'm not you at all. And if you can say something, even though I don't look at you as a holy cow per se, I still understand that you're going to have certain things about your identity that were left intact. And you're going to have certain things about your identity that were not, because you've also been colonized. And I'm going to have certain things about our identity that's been left intact because of the resistance to the kidnapping. And I'm also going to have certain things that are not left intact because we were in fact kidnapped, colonized, and enslaved. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Artzak. Ape kabar. Sarang jumpa lagi. Kilowatt hour bike. When I say that I'm ADOS, I'm saying to you that you got something intact I don't, and I'm willing to learn from that. And I'm also saying to you that we got some things that are intact that you may have lost, and you can learn from these things. And so the next time someone asks me, well, why is it that you start off your messages speaking Arabic and you preaching this foreign religion of these tragic desert mulattoes to us, I would say this: it's because it was taken willfully by large segments of the continent. If you discount the Sahara, it was still taken on willingly by large portions of the continent without the Sahara, willingly. And even by people that previously before that did not like each other very much, they could agree that this was good for us. That's why I say that. That's why I preach it. That's why I can believe it. The other reason is because, as Dwight says, genetically, the ADOS American is a result of several groups of Black people that under normal circumstances would not have had anything to do with each other. And it's true that there were people that didn't even know each other. So they certainly would not have married only because of the distance between them. I mean, the Mandinka and the Zulu did not meet each other. You can call yourself a Zulu Mandingo today. They didn't meet each other until after apartheid. That's when West Africans began to migrate to South Africa, and some of them were Mandinka, and they met some people that were Zulus. Now they may have heard about each other. I didn't say hurt, H-U-R-T, but heard about each other. When I went to visit back in 2018, I was a Mandingo going into South Africa and meeting the Zulus. But the thing is this: when you look into Africa itself, if you want to see Black people of different origins get along very well with each other to the point that they can marry, you're going to find that amongst the Muslims more than anyone else. You have Yoruba that are Christians. The Igbo are famously Christian. They're not all Christian, but they're famously Christian. I mean, they're known for that. They're associated with the church. A lot of the preachers that you see are not Yoruba, but rather they are Igbo. And so with this ADOS division, ADOS, non-ADOS, African, non-African, or African versus diaspora, with all these divisions that are being pushed on us, number one, we didn't start off this divided before, because a lot of people that lived next door to each other on the continent previously learned each other's languages. Wars and skirmishes were not very long lasting, partially due to the prisoner of war system. It was not a situation in which every time you had two tribes living next door to each other, they fought. That's a stereotype, and we believed it. But in reality, it's normal for people back home to grow up learning several languages, 4 to 6 languages, because of the people next door to whom they live. They go to the market, they're all there. So you can go and there's a guy person and he's got his stall set up in the market, and every person next door and he's got his stall set up in the market next to each other. If they were enemies, they couldn't do this. This peace between people that live next door to each other is actually the norm. That's the default back home. And so now in the Americas, the ADOS, the Jamaican, the Trinidadian, the Bajan, the Haitian, the Dominican from the Dominican Republic, the Dominican from Dominica, the Bahamian, the Guyanese, the Garifuna. We are all these combinations of various ethnic groups that may not have even lived that close to each other. But one thing I can say is that even now, to this day, if you want to see Black folk that have these not just different origins, but origins far away from each other geographically, get along with each other when they do finally meet, even to the point that they can marry, you're going to see that amongst us as Muslims. That's why I said what I said. That's why I told you that Islam was the solution. Yeah, I'm going deep today. Everybody ain't going to believe me when I say that it's the solution. But what I'm saying is that my reason for saying it is completely justified, because if Black unity is a goal, you ain't going to get no closer to that than this. I'm not required to unite with an Arab that's a racist because he says he's Muslim. I'm not required to be loyal to him. I'm required to be fair, not oppress him, sure. If anything, I'm required to correct him about that. But I'm going to tell y'all straight. You want to see black unity, you can see it here. So what this director was trying to get at, I'm saying to you practically that we're sitting on the solution for it. And I say we're sitting on it because even though I've actually accepted it, Dwight has accepted it. Art Zuck has accepted it. And Art Zuck, to prove my point to you gentlemen listening right now, Art Zuck is from Indonesia. He does not know of any African ancestry in him, although you can see some people in Indonesia and you think they're from Africa. But as far as I know, Art Zuck does not, he's not aware of having any African ancestry. He comes in here to this space with a sense of unity with us. He's one that actually prefers the oppressed over the oppressor. He prefers us over them, if you understand if you catch my drift. And he's very normal in his environment. This is common. What's the reason? Because he has a sense of justice that a lot of other people are missing, because he takes Islam seriously. Dwight Hayes can, and Lord willing, will marry someone, a black woman of a completely different origin, but she shares the religion. I myself have done that. I'm a Creole from the Gulf Coast. Creoles generally live from about Pensacola going as far west as Houston, although the concentrations are in Mobile and the coast of Louisiana. Those are the concentrations. I'm not going to say exactly where I'm from. My family does come out of Mobile. That's where my family comes out. That's true. But I'm not saying exactly where I'm from because it really doesn't matter. When I say I'm Creole, we're all along the Gulf Coast. Most of us are Catholic. I became Muslim. I'm now married to, and I'm going to tell y'all this, because this is important to understand in the context of not only these movie reviews, but in the context of the ADOS, non-ADOS, African, non-African divide, or African versus diaspora divide. When I married my wife, and she's from the Horn of Africa, and she comes from multiple generations, going back over a millennia of being Muslim, and her people accepted it without conquest. No Arab ever conquered the Horn of Africa. They did not conquer West Africa. They did not conquer the Horn. They didn't even believe that they could do so. It was as unthinkable at that time as China just invading. It was more unthinkable at that time, actually, than China launching an invasion, an infantry invasion at that of the United States is unthinkable today. Even. It was more unthinkable. It wasn't just Abyssinia that scared them. It wasn't that. No, they did not want to go in and fight with sub-Saharan Africans. And the thing is, they didn't think about doing it because they didn't have to do it. And so what I'm going to get at here is that when I married her, the first day that she was getting ready to go to work after we got married, I mean, we tied the knot, but then I went to join her in the country in which she was born, which is next door to here. And then we came back here to start work a few weeks later. And the first day that we were getting ready to go to work, she was getting dressed up for work. She put a tinyon on her head. Now, a tinyon is the head wrap. You just look it up, Tignon. If you put that tinyon on your head, that's what the Creole women were wearing. It was like a turban, but for women. That's what the Creole women used to wear back in the 17 and 1800s. As a matter of fact, there was a law requiring it at one point, and back when Louisiana was a French colony. And the women didn't mind because the Creoles themselves, we come from Senegal and Gambia and Mali. We come from Muslim people. Our actual ancestors back home are some of the blackest in Africa. The Wolof are the majority of our ancestors. The Bambara, next. Then the Mandinka and whoever else lived near them, like the Soninke, those are our ancestors, Senegal, Gambia, and Mali. That's where our ancestry comes from as Creoles. We're actually one of the few that get to know exactly where we came from, and we've known it for a long time. Before the Gullah knew that they came from Sierra Leone, largely, the Rice Coast. And that's Kwame Brown's ancestry. He said he's Geechee. They also call themselves Gullah. And by the way, the people they came from were Muslims too. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But when I married her, and the first day she got ready to go to work, she put a tinyon on her head as far as I could tell. I was like, wait a minute. Where did you get that? Because of the way that she tied it. The way that she tied it up, I said, wait, where did you learn that from? And she said, learn what? And I asked her about tying up the 10 yarn. We had a discussion about it. I even texted home. I was like, yo, mom, in the Horn, they wear 10 yarns. And I started to see these cultural similarities between her, not just between her and African Americans anyway, but even between her specifically and the Creoles. To tell the truth, Magnesium, that's the general perception. But the truth is, I'm really not typical for Creoles. The way that I look is not typical. Most Creoles actually look more like Dwight Hayes' picture. Now, I don't think he's Creole, but most Creoles actually resemble him and you more. That's actually the standard. If there is a standard phenotype, really you all's phenotype is the standard. The stereotype is that they look more ambiguous. And the thing is this is what's happened because there's been a lot of confusion even amongst Creoles about that. The Creoles, sometimes they've taken, okay, so you are classified as a Creole of color, okay. The Creoles have taken in some people that were not, or they become friends with some people that might have come from like New Jersey or places like that, as an example. Okay, even come from outside the country. Sometimes what happens is that people that look the stereotype are thought to be Creole, and they're not. And then other times, people that look more normal to the rest of us are not known to be Creole, but they are. So what happens is this. Most people most people that are Creole don't actually tell you they're Creole because they don't look it, they don't expect you to believe them. So, and I've met several of them. When I go to my family reunion, we do run the gamut in terms of how we look, but the majority actually look very much so African American. But they'll tell you, we don't tell people that we're Creole because we don't expect them to believe us. Family members already know. But like, you take somebody that went from, if somebody leaves where we're from and they go and they move to, let's say they move to Atlanta, but they don't look like the stereotypical Creole, they're not going to tell people in Atlanta that they're Creole. But if they meet someone to whom they're related, then it's already known and then they don't have to say it. So that's why it might be confusing. So anyway, if you want me to Google it and look it up, then hold on, let me look up Creole of color. The truth be told, the term Creole of color, or nowadays the term Creole, just in general, the term Creole is now taken to it's assumed to include those who have African blood. Now, do you want me to show the images, Nakmeezy, or do you want me to show the regular search? Walaikum salam, Blaze the Stampede. I'm giving Nakmeezy time to type it in, type in which one he wants, because I actually did a Bing search because that was my default search engine. I hope that doesn't make a difference, but okay, image, all right. Okay, so the images come up on Bing, and I'll show them. Wow. Okay, hold on, I'm trying to share the screen. Now, this is my first time sharing the screen on this, so give me a moment. Okay, I see share window. That's what I need to do. Okay, so let me see if it's showing for you all. Okay, this is what comes up. Now, I'll tell you the one that I know is not really true. Actually, I'll take it back. I can't even say that I can't be sure that it's not, but I got my doubts. This one right here, if you all can see the cursor pointing, this one. If you can see my cursor as it points, Okay, that one. All right, that one there. She may actually be Creole in terms of heritage, meaning she's had Creole ancestors. The truth be told, most of us, we would look and not be so sure that she's Creole. We wouldn't be shocked if she had ancestry, but if she showed up at our family reunion, we would actually be shocked that she knew she had the ancestry. Because usually people like her don't even know that they have Creole ancestry. They also would not tell you that they're Creole. If they don't know you and you're not related to them, they're the ones also that would not do so. They wouldn't tell you if they were. But if you look more like, hold on. So I wasn't trying to take the images out. And I wasn't clicking on that either. Now, these photos actually, to be fair to Nakmeezy, these photos, because back then the black and white photos of the old photography made a lot of people look a little bit darker than they actually were in real life, to be fair. So this guy may have actually been paler in real life than what we see in the photo. That's a possibility. But judging by how he looks to our eyes on the photo, people that look like him usually don't tell you the Creole either. The ones that will tell you the Creole, because people will ask them anyway, they're the ones that look like maybe this guy going up to this lady here. I'm not sure if, I don't know if you're, can you all see my cursor or my pointer? Can y'all see that? When I move the cursor or the pointer, can y'all see what the cursor itself? Because sometimes that does not show. Okay, all right. So generally speaking, the ones that get asked if they're Creole, they look like her. And this is a formal tignon. This is not the tignon that you would have just worn at a normal on a normal day. This is the formal tignon that's on these two ladies' heads. They might be asked that, and so they would say, yes, I am. Someone like him might have been asked that depending on his last name. Yes, this guy would have been asked that. Now, there are people that look like him, like this gentleman here, and they're not Creole. But not only are they taken for Creole, they may actually think that they are. That happened a lot. Still happens to this day. There's a family, they're friends with my parents, but they live in New Orleans. This family does. So they don't live near my parents, but they're friends with them. And they were mistaken for Creole all the time. All the time they were taken for it. And to be honest with you, the reason that they were taken for it was only because the wife had green eyes, and the husband's hair was kind of an intermediate texture, if you will, in between straight and 4C. It was somewhere intermediate, and they were successful. That was the other thing. So it was assumed that they were, even though they weren't necessarily, they weren't Creole, actually. I think she's from New Jersey and he's from Bermuda in actuality. So now this one here is a travesty right there. But I'm gonna explain why it is that the term Creole is used by us today. And when it comes down to what it means to other people, Creole generally means a combination of some sort, just to be fair. But initially, Nakmeezy, Creole meant anybody from the old world that was born in the new world. As a matter of fact, the French weren't the first ones to use that term. The Spaniards were, as far as we know. They would call people criollos, meaning that somebody was of Spanish heritage, but born in the new world. They weren't born to Indian parents, but they were still born in the new world. And so they were considered to be from the Americas, but also from Spain. And so then they were the first ones to be referred to as Creoles. Later on, so if you go by the old definition, yeah, you'd say that they weren't black. They weren't even Native American, if you go by the first definition. Later on, they turned around and the French and Spaniards, but mostly the French, began to apply this term to people that were of African origin, but who had a French ancestor on record or a Spanish ancestor on record. So there were Africans that had a French or German or Spanish ancestor somewhere. but they weren't necessarily recorded as having such. The French would record the racial mixture. So if, because of the system of plaçage, now Dennis Sperling pronounced it placage, which is not how it was pronounced, but the French really called it plaçage, and that was like a not quite marriage between a white Frenchman and a woman of any amount of African blood. Usually she would be a free woman, but of any amount of African blood, whether she was 100% African or she was even a quadroon or an octoroon, they would call that plaçage. So what wound up being the case was that if an African woman of any amount had a child by a Frenchman, he could still record that that child was his in the courthouse. And so then that lineage will be considered Creole, not just because of the mixture, because the mixture could happen without it being recorded. The Americans that did this, that had children with African women, would not record these children as their own. They would record them only in the inventory of property. But the French would record these children as their own children, and so there would be an inheritance that went down the line. And that's really the major difference between a Creole and any other African American. The racial mixture is not the main difference, just to be fair. It's just the recording of it in formerly French colonies of North America, in what are now county courthouse records. And in Louisiana, it would be parish courthouse records. That's really all that is. It was just a recording of the genealogy. What's going on, Sir Anthony? So to be fair, I understand you would say, well, that's not what an African looks like. And in most of sub-Saharan Africa, yeah, that's true in most of it. There are places where you would see close to this phenotype, if not that phenotype. Now, West Africa, you got the Vai people. The Igbo were known to be extremely yellow, actually, at one point, but their hair was not straight. Same thing with the Vai. The Vai are known to be a light red shade, but their hair is generally still 4C. In Ethiopia, you got a tribe, they ain't mixed with nobody because they live on a very high mountainside. They look exactly the same as East Indians, but they've never been with anybody else because they live isolated. And sometimes you see them inside of Ethiopia. A few of them went to the US as well, but they have their own language. And so Indians go to them all the time speaking Hindi, thinking that they're the same until they respond and say, no, I'm from Ethiopia. Or they have to say it in their own language. But I mean, there have been cases like this. The Khoi and the San were very pale, but again, their hair was 4C. So the truth be told, even the admixture, just to be fair and to be accurate, the admixture has wound up affecting hair texture and maybe facial hair growth patterns and body hair growth more than it has really affected the complexion. But what we see here, of course, an image search is going to pull up paler people. I knew that before I did it, but I did it anyway, before I did the search. It's going to pull up paler people in general. Now, if you are in Mauritius and you do a search for the term Creole, if you type in Creole of color, you're typing in English. But if you just do a search for the term Creole, then it might pull up something different. And my brother went to the Seychelles, and they were also called Creole there. But I think Creole there had a slightly different meaning. It had more to do with either a culture or a cuisine, if I'm not mistaken. I have to ask him what it was. But yeah, I didn't expect them to pull up the Jet as Black as People on an image search. You darn near have to be Creole and go to the family reunions to find out why it is that people tend to get confused, because even Creoles may make this mistake of thinking that a non-Creole is Creole and not knowing that somebody else that doesn't look it is related to them, because most Creoles don't actually look the way we expect a Creole to look. Most really don't. You have more Creoles with loose hair than you actually do with the pale skin complexion. And even in terms of the males, that's more common. Loose hair textures are more common, but I don't want to bore you all with that, not necessarily. But I wanted to say that when I sit up here and when I talk and I say that Islam is a solution to us, if you believe in a type of Black unity, I have to be fair and tell you that the most Black unity I saw was within the Muslim community. The woman that has made me the happiest in my life is from East Africa. She can't hear me talking now. I got 2 doors closed and she's asleep. So I'm not saying this to get points with her. She doesn't know I'm telling y'all this, but the woman that's made me the happiest in my life is from from Eastern Africa. She's from the Horn. The woman that made me the second happiest in my life was from North Africa. She was black. Her father was jet black. She just ironically came out looking more like I did. But she was certainly a black woman. Just to be fair. And see, that's something, Dwight, because one thing we know is that it's only been recently that people from the Horn would marry even each other from different tribes, let alone marry someone else. So for him to look this way, it would have a lot to do with climate, more than likely. It would have more to do with that, or East Indians knowing that they have some black blood in themselves and then coming up to him. That's what it would have more to do with that, because you and I both know that people from the Horn, even 10 years ago, was fairly difficult. 20 years ago, they might consider somebody that's black and Muslim before they consider someone from another tribe they were fighting. But you and I know how they generally not too long ago, they did not marry outside. They didn't even marry a lot of each other. It was difficult for them to get married. So for them to have this resemblance, it has very little, if anything at all, to do with some sort of outside influence. And the truth be told, I think that the Arabs come from them. I think the modern day Arabs are a combination of East African origins that they came from, and then other groups like the Persians and Circassians that moved in later on, and the Turks. But I truly believe that the original Arabs were indistinguishable from East Africans except by language, because they say we come from Yemen. You ask Arab, where's the origin? It's Yemen. Yeah, okay, well, the Yemenis had an origin too. And we already know that it came from, we know the Yemeni origin is East African because they did DNA swabs even back in 1998 or 99. Danny Glover narrated that documentary called The Real Eve. And they traced back the first successful human migration out of Africa to Yemen. It wasn't the first one, but it was the first successful one where they didn't die off. It was when the ice age was in effect, the sea level was lower. You could stand on the coast of what's now Eritrea or Somalia, and you could see the nearest part of Yemen. You could see the hills there, and they waded across the water because it was shallow. The Red Sea was almost cut off from the Indian Ocean because the water levels were so low. So they went and waded across that. It was only about 250 people at that time. And they became the ancestors of everybody outside of Africa. And that's it. So they really became the first people outside of Africa. They became the first Yemenis. So if Yemenis have an origin, that's the origin. And I know that a lot of people, a lot of Arabs don't get angry when you tell them this. They don't believe it. A lot of Yemenis actually get confused. They don't even get angry. I've had Yemenis look at me like, wait, really? That explains it. And they'll sit up and say, oh, that explains a lot. Yeah, Mr. Hayes, that's the funny thing about it. Nowadays, it's even getting better. Like I've been saying just now for the last few minutes, I've been saying that when you are Muslim and you're black, it's easier to be united with other black folks. But it's actually improving. It's increasing over time. And so what you're seeing is evidence of that. Being Muslim helps out. And black Muslims from different origins, because even all black Muslims don't come from the same tribe and everything, but being Muslim and being black, it actually does make it a lot easier. Unless you're just going to be a jerk, in which case nobody would unite with you no matter what your belief system is. So I would say that I've covered religion enough, I think, just for now. But I did want to say that this movie, that last movie, Black Box, that was deep. That was deep. Art Zuck, hold up. Let me put this up here. That was good, bro. That right there. The Prophet Yusuf, alayhi salam. In the Quran, he was identified to us as being the most attractive man to women. And as a matter of fact, there was a scholar whose name I won't say because it would trip a lot of alarms, probably get me deported if not killed. But years before the scholar was on anybody's radar, he recorded a series about the hereafter. And one of the things he said was that Adam was given a vision. He was allowed to see how many people there would be. And each person was allowed to appear to him as a star. And the prophets were brighter stars than other people. So he asked about some of these bright stars that were shining, and which person they represented. And he was told that some of them represented prophets, Anbiya, alayhum salam. So one of them he asked about, and that was, I think it was Dawood. And he asked that Dawood be given, alayhi salam, he asked that Dawood be given some of the years of his own life. So Adam donated some of the years of his life to Dawood before Dawood was even created amongst human beings. And he asked that some of his beauty be donated to Yusuf. Now, Adam was black. His name in Arabic means he was black. That's what the name means. Adam is like the noun for a person, or a thing. It's like where the noun and the adjective meet in Arabic, but idma is the noun for darkness. It's one of the nouns. There are other nouns for it, but one of the nouns for darkness is idma. And that is a derivative of the name Adam. That's the Arabs will tell you that. Now they might want to admit that he was black, but they know that the name Adam means he was black. Some will tell you he was black. I've had that conversation too. They're like, yeah, Adam's black, definitely. That's how we started off. So you get all kind of reactions from modern day Arabs when you say this, just to be fair. But what I'm getting at is that Adam was black, and he said, I'm donating some of my beauty to this star over here that's one of the Anbiya that's going to come later on from my lineage. So what Artzuk just said, mind you, Artzuk is not coming from African origin. And yet he's saying he knows this. MashaAllah. I appreciate you telling us this, Artzuk. I mean, I know it, but I appreciate you saying this so that I don't have to. Jazakallah khair and Teddy Makasi. So this one is funny right there. That's funny. I wouldn't have expected that. But I wanted to say, though, that regarding the whole division between black folks, I've already talked at length about how you can break down these divisions if you want to. An easiest way to do it. I'm on this. Dwight is on it. And even people that ain't black, like Artzuk, are also on this. You can break these divisions down. But also, even when someone isn't, what you're going to see is that you don't have to be hostile to Sama Artzuk. You don't have to be hostile to people that are from elsewhere, thinking that they're out to get you. Even the one that's not necessarily, I mean, even the African that ain't Muslim, even the Caribbean that ain't Muslim is not your enemy because you're ADOS. They're not walking around saying you're not black enough, you're a problem, you're a akata, or they're not walking around saying this about you. Can they tell that you're lost? Absolutely. We can tell that they're lost in certain ways. I mean, if we're going to keep it real, and a lot of times they'll admit it. You can get into honest conversations with them about this, like civilized human beings, and they'll learn something. Yeah, there are ways in which they're lost and ways in which we're lost. They can see that we're lost because we're depicted as such, and many of us believe this, but they have noticed that when they sit down and they talk with us brothers, they've noticed that we ain't really what we're depicted as on TV. And they can see this. That's what this guy was getting at. That's what the director, Emmanuel Osei-Kuffour Jr. was getting at. You sitting up here trying to impress Dr. Brooks. And she's viewing you with expectations based on white supremacist stereotypes. But in reality, that ain't even you, bro. She may be unruly, but that ain't you. You really ain't the problem by yourself. And even she's been traumatized herself. But the difference is that you're not ruining her. She says you ruined her, but you're not really the one that's even ruining her. She's doing it to you. I'm not your enemy. I know you're not a wildcat. I know you're not just a dumb akata, as many of us like to say that they call us. And regarding their term, even akata, see, Emmanuel Osei, he's Ghanaian. The people that sit up and call us akata and talk down on us, they're from not only Nigeria, but a specific region in Nigeria. They do this even to other Nigerians. They're not walking around hating Black Americans. Ain't a Nigerian that walks around just hating African Americans without having any experience with us. It's just that they have this trash talking culture in Lagos, and they'll talk trash about anybody, even each other. You're in the room, they talk trash about you. A Lagos person is more likely to compliment you behind your back than to your face. You're in the room, they're going to talk about you, talk down on you. But that's why we think that most Africans are walking around talking down on African Americans. But what's going on is that you got more of us that are beginning to say, we ain't from no Africa. We always been in America. We Blackfoot, Blackfoot, right? Mandan, Choctaw, and start naming out Washita, naming all these tribes that belong to the Americas, and saying and telling people from the continent, I ain't you. I ain't even come from you. I'm not even related to you. I don't know you. We don't share no ancestry at all. And this is what's going to make it easier for people from the continent to lose hope and lose faith, because the people that say that we're not from Africa are very few, but they're very loud. And the loudest amongst them are the ones that start insulting people from Africa. They're louder than the ones that just say, well, we're just not from there. We just got the same color. And so if this continues on, then we're going to reach a situation in which they're going to start writing us off for real and might even join others against us. And I don't want that. And as I said, best way to put a stop to that is going to be what I've already told us is a solution, even though a lot of us don't want to believe it. Don't worry. What I've told us is a solution, which is the religion of Islam. What I've said to be the solution does not mean that you become a slave to the Arabs. Don't worry about that. That's not going to be the problem. Because first thing is this: even if the Arab calls you a slave, you can call him a terrorist and he'll start crying. He'll jump out of his skin. I shouldn't have said that word, but what I'm saying is you could say that just as a pejorative. He knows you're not a slave. You know that he's not that T word, but you could say it just to show them that you don't play those games. Don't worry. The ones of them that are not serious about this faith aren't going to want to unify with you anyway. The question of a unity between us and them is not the issue. It's not even a dream that Muslims who are Black entertain. I mean, even in Indonesia and in Malaysia, they'll tell you, man, we're getting tired of Arabs. This is something they've told me. I didn't say this to them. They told this to me. In Malaysia, a man whose grandfather was an Arab told me, we're getting sick of them. We're tired of them smoking, and we're tired of the way they drive, and we're tired of their manners. I had to calm him down. I had to say to him, bro, if you think these cats are bad, why don't you come back with me and teach my students? And do it for a whole term so that you can see how badly they cheat on the exams and how and it was much worse back then than what it is now. But at that time, I had to tell them, if you think the ones here bad, no, come with me. It's not a question of us trying to unify with them or trying to unify with anybody else for that matter, unless they choose it. But if you want to talk about Black unity, I've already told you, okay, well, that's the easiest way. But even if you're not going to take that, even if you ain't going to take it, at the very least, we're going to have to start looking at people from amongst our own ranks that start dissing Africans for things they didn't do and questioning them. How do you know that Africans, not specifically from one country, let alone one city, but how do you know that entire continent has a problem with us? Like, how did you find that out? How many of them did you talk to? Which ones of them told you this? Because to know this, you got to go and ask a Ghanaian. Then you got to ask him what tribe he's from. Then you got to go ask another Ghanaian from another tribe. Then you got to go and ask another Ivorian from another tribe. And you got to go ask two different Ivorians from two different tribes, the same thing. You got to go and ask a Sierra Leonean from one tribe, then from another. You got to go and ask different nationalities and different individuals of them from different tribes to ask them, okay, do all of y'all look down on us just because we African American? And what's the reason? And then you got to get a consistent answer as to what the reasons are. Now, they may tell you, we've seen you depicted badly on TV and on the shows. Yeah, yeah, they'll do that. They may tell you how they've seen you, but as far as them hating you, looking down on you, really just taking their enemy's word, their colonizer's word for how you are when they know you were snatched away from them. Even if it was by their own ancestors, you got snatched away. Even if that's the case, they're going to look at you and they're going to say, wait a minute, hate you? But you sitting here talking to me right now and you haven't harmed me. If I just hated y'all, I'd hate you without you harming me. You didn't harm me. You just asked me a question and I don't hate you. How dumb would I have to be to do that? And another thing too, is that in the event that you find one that does hate us, and that has happened when some have had bad experiences. I met an Ethiopian that went to Piney Wood School in Mississippi, a boarding school, black boarding school in Mississippi, but he was Ethiopian. He got there and he said, I did in the beginning, I started to hate them because they would start ranking on me, but then I found out they were making fun of each other too, and they didn't hate each other. I still hated them for making fun of me because I was nice in the beginning, but then there was Corey. I still remember the name of the man I never met, but the Ethiopian brother told me about the name. He told me the name of an African American that befriended him, Corey, and got others to leave him alone. And then he began to learn the history and he realized, okay, they're traumatized and most of them don't even hate me. So even his hatred started from a bad experience with children in childhood. And he was thinking as a child. And after that, he was a Pan-Africanist. By the time he was grown and by the time I met him, he was a Pan-Africanist. I was at their church. This is before I became Muslim. And he came and introduced himself. And mind you, he knew I was a brother. Knew right off the bat because some of his people, he'd seen my resemblance in some of his own people. So that Black Box was not just an entertaining movie. That was a movie, that was a message about our unity, about our redemption and our healing, and ultimately even our unity, at least cooperation for the greater good. Even if we ain't all gonna like each other, because that's not realistic, at least the cooperation for the greater good. Because understand, when Nolan was walking around thinking he was Tom, that's when he was in the most danger. Even in that movie, and it was Yebwa that had to say to him, no, bro, somebody else's memories you got. Nolan, I know you're in there. Come on out, bro. So that being said, you all have been very patient with me as I've gone on for 2 hours preaching. I really do appreciate that. Thank you all for listening patiently. Dwight, Art Zuck, Red Sif Lord. It was really, and Sir Anthony, it was really good to see y'all again. Nakmeezy, it was good to have you on. I still haven't forgotten. And the dates that are the best for you, when you tell me, I'll block those off ahead of time. And thank you all for listening and for your patience. Assalamu alaikum. Black heart, black mind, black out. Black heterosexual, non-select male power, just because they don't like it. And black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day.